This video is going to contain spoilers from the off, so I'm warning you now. The Shape of Time is the most recent episode of Foundation, and honestly, what an ending to an episode it was. The Mule is now reigning terror on New Terminus, and judging by how the story looks set to unfold, New Terminus could crumble, and it could lead the Mule straight to Empire's door. The season is now really hotting up, and with it being revealed that Brother Dawn was killed following the chamber being breached in the previous episode when he was dragged into outer space, Brother Day now looking like he's on the cusp of being wiped out by Song's One True Love on Mycogen. The thrones on Trantor are now sitting empty, and all that's there is a fading Brother Dusk who has one of the most powerful weapons in the palm of his hands, the Novacula. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode of Foundation and discuss all that there was to take away and all that there could be to come based on what we saw. Here is Foundation Season 3 Episode 6, Ending Explained. Gaal and Demerzel. Gaal and Demerzel's story was particularly interesting in this episode because Demerzel revealed herself to be a robot to Gaal. Something that Gaal didn't know because Harry Seldon kept it a secret that he worked with Demerzel in order to create psychohistory. Seldon required her knowledge as she'd been around for well over 10,000 years, and it was crucial to look back in order to see what could be ahead. Demerzel believed Gaal to be a threat to Empire, which is why she was on the cusp of killing her and was choking her inside of the beggar. But it was when Gaal mentioned that there was a second foundation that was hidden in order to fight the Mule, and that she was the shadow that was showing in the threads of the Prime Radiant, it was then when Demerzel eased off. It was also here where we found out that Brother Dawn was killed when he was dragged into outer space, showing that he died as a meaningless pawn in Gaal's game because she simply wanted Calgon to fall so that Empire was weaker and it would lead the Mule to going to Trantor. Then that way the second foundation would be able to intervene and seize him with their ships. At least that's what she hoped. To no surprise, Demerzel's character was performed so well in this scene. The emotion that she exhibited despite being a robot was just so conflicting, but it also just felt so right. That maternal, motherly, caring instinct that she had and the conflict over what to feel and if they were feelings being right at the heart of it because she was essentially mourning her child. It was just so powerful to watch. Saying things like how she raised him, she protected him, and she watched his first steps. It showed that she was so hurt. Pair this with Gaal simply saying that there was another dawn that could be decanted. It showed a different side to Gaal, and that in this moment, the human was the one that showed no emotions, ultimately making Demerzel's character even more of a complex one. What's strange about this episode is that Demerzel had so many emotions, but it was also probably the most robotic and emotionless that we've seen her in this season of the show, channeling frequencies, utilizing her abilities, and even speaking like she's a program. But then on the flip side, she was filled with emotion and pain, so it was so interesting. Demerzel is programmed to protect Empire whatever the cost, which is why she was going to kill Gaal. However, with Demerzel going inside of Gaal's mind and seeing the visions that she spoke of, the battle with the Mule, which we found out was taking place on Trantor inside of the Imperial Library, she spared Gaal's life. She also saw that this end of the thread wasn't complete nothingness. It was going to leave them all around the edge of a black hole just floating through time, the space of time. And what do we know causes black holes at the moment? The Novacula. So it seems like the end of the chain that the Prime Radiant's predicting could be brought about by Brother Dusk, or maybe even somebody else, as long as they end up behind the wheel of the Novacula. The Mule has it in him to destroy everything and anybody in his path, so it could well be him that ends up causing the end with that very tool. With Demerzel leaving the beggar at the end and hearing that the Mule had invaded New Terminus, I feel like she implied to Gaal that she'd be seeing her soon, because all of these events were leading to the impending battle that's going to be taking place on Trantor in 4 months' time. Demerzel couldn't specifically help at that point because she still couldn't determine how much of a threat to Empire Gaal's involvement in all of this would be, so I think we'll see an alliance between them forming in the not-so-distant future. I do also wonder how Demerzel is going to tie into all of this. If she's a robot, what power does the Mule have over her? Can she evade his mind control abilities, and with the strength that she has, could she be the person to destroy him? New Terminus. New Terminus is where the party was definitely at during the episode, and with us seeing the power of the Visisona in bringing all factions of the Foundation together to unite them in this fight against the Mule, Mayor Indber finally started to come around to understanding just how much of a threat that the Mule could be, especially with the Mule unleashing terror onto the planet. Tauren, Beta, Randu, and Magnifico arrived on New Terminus, and something that I thought was pretty funny was that Randu told Indba not to refer to Magnifico as a dog, but in the same breath, Beta was walking around and calling him her puppy, so pick a side. It was the day that the vault was opening, and Selden was going to be revealing himself to the people of New Terminus. However, with the Mallows on the planet, it caused a disruption because he brought an associate of the Mule. Indba was concerned because he feared that the Mule was going to be coming for Magnifico, and the fact that they had him would cause him to unleash terror. But as Tauren said, he'd looked into the eyes of the Mule, and he was headed there anyway. What I thought was particularly interesting was that as he said the line about looking into the eyes of the Mule, it cut to Magnifico's eyes looking around. Again, tying into that theory about Magnifico actually being the real Mule, or maybe the show could be spinning things on its head and having two mules. We also saw how powerful the Visisona was in the episode because it allowed the traders and the governing bodies of the Foundation to join forces and put their differences aside for a greater cause. It was said to strip an individual down and disarm them, which is exactly what the Mule was doing when he took the entirety of Calgon, so without it, he could definitely be weaker. There were parts in this episode where Magnifico was just playing the music to himself, so it does make me wonder if everything that we're seeing on New Terminus, and even the fact that Beta took him in episode 4, could it have been orchestrated by Magnifico, knowing full well that the Mule was planning on going to New Terminus. When Selden awoke and the vault opened, he didn't have a clue what the Mule was, who he was, and he thought that the third crisis that he was there for was the disagreement between the factions. So seeing everybody confused at him, just like how he was confused about the Mule, it made for some humorous viewing. It was humorous because it basically showed that many of these people had believed in something that didn't turn out to be true, because psychohistory didn't account for the Mule's presence. So not only will there be disarray because the Mule appeared and attacked the planet, but there'll also be disarray because the people of New Terminus won't truly know what to believe anymore. The Mule's opening scene. What I loved about the opening scene was that the Mule's journey in this episode almost went full circle. He opened it with an incredible speech that spoke of how he'd had Gaal plaguing his dreams and that he didn't know who this person was until Pritchard was in the vicinity of him. And then only through him and his weakness he was then able to get a name. But as well as this, he also went on to say how he was going to destroy anything and anybody that was in his path in order to kill Gaal Dornick. And then, right at the end of the episode, it closed out by him launching his attack on New Terminus and the Foundation in standing by those very words. The way that this scene was shot felt very reminiscent of the scene with the Mule in the closing moments of the Season 2 finale, in there being this haze and this blue hue where there was also a sense of panic in not truly knowing the steps that were ahead. The Mule's character is so menacing, and the determination that he had in this episode during the opening scene to drive forward and find New Terminus, but also to then surprise Selden and the people on the planet by showing them that all of their fleet were fighting against each other because of the mind control that he had, highlighted just how strong he was. The Mule saying to Selden, "This was always a part of my plan. Was it a part of yours?" as he was culling the herd before he took the reins, showed that he was even outsmarting Selden, and he was proving to be a disruption that nobody, not even Selden himself, expected to come across. He's just such a great villain, and the menacing nature that he has is something that feels so refreshing in this season of the show. I said this last week, and I'll say it again. I really want more intimate time with the Mule to truly understand him a bit more. I liked the opening scene, I also liked episode 1 and episode 2, but in recent times it just kind of feels like we've had those close-ups of him tucked away and the holographs where he's communicating. With him launching an attack on New Terminus, I reckon we could see him on the planet and causing disruption firsthand, just like what we saw when he was on Calgon. I'm thinking Mayor Indba might actually get put in his place. The only thing that the Foundation has going in their favour at the moment is that they have Magnifico on their side, apparently, with his Visisona, so the Mule might not be able to take as much control as he wants. Brother Day. Now, if I'm being honest, I thought this was probably one of the saddest arcs that we've seen in the show in such a long time. But because it's Brother Day and knowing how much of a ruthless, tyrannical leader that he's been in the past, it somewhat feels deserved, but still. The pain that he was experiencing was sad to bear witness to. Brother Day was sneaking around Mycogen under the cover of a disguise, and during this time he witnessed that Calgon was taken by the Mule, and the Imperial fleet was destroyed. The look in his eyes and the tone in his voice spoke 1,000 words. He knew the devastation that the Mule was bringing, and he looked happy to not be on Trantor at that moment, because he knew the wrath that was on the horizon. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind Brother Dude, but I do kind of miss that ruthless battle warrior that was Brother Day in Season 2. A Season 2 Brother Day would have taken the fight to the Mule and given everything to destroy him and protect Empire. But this one is just besotted, and it actually seems like that's now going to be the very thing that brings about his end. Day's sole intention for being on Mycogen was so that he could be reunited with Song, the person that he was deeply in love with when they were on Trantor, and he wanted to give her the memories that Demerzel stole from her so that they could continue being a couple. The fact that the treats that he got on the market were a gift for her shows just how different Brother Day has actually been. Song wanted nothing to do with Day, and she didn't want her memories back. She was even confused as to why he was there because all she could remember was being taken there for a night with him and then having the journey back. With Day admitting his love for her, in secret she called for backup, and when it arrived it was Ocean Glass, the person that was her life partner on Mycogen. This showed that all of the feelings that Day experienced with Song on Trantor were fake because she viewed it as simply a way of surviving. She said, "If I ever told you I loved you, it was because I was scared of you. I never could have loved you." This broke Day's heart, and we saw him being shot across the room, fumbling his words because he was heartbroken and in shock at what was happening. I think this scene felt like a metaphor and a way of showing us even more how Empire was the weakest that it had ever been. Brother Day was on the cusp of being wiped out by a native of Mycogen, and there was nothing that he could do about it. He'd become the victim, something that he'd had many of over the years, and there was now only one brother left that was sitting on the throne. My review of the episode. I thought this was a really strong episode of the show. It was on the slower side when compared to the episodes that came before it, but this felt like the episode where information was shared and it essentially became the Mule versus the entirety of the galaxy. There were so many gorgeous shots in this episode, whether it be the beautiful seamlessness of Demerzel and Gaal at the edge of the thread within the Prime Radiant where they were plunged into darkness. Seeing it transition between them in such a smooth way was just gorgeous to look at. Or whether it be the dream sequence where the Mule was petrified at the fact that Gaal had been plaguing them for many years. But the one that I'd say was my favourite to look at was the final battle scene, when the nullfill was raised, the vision became blurry, and we saw the sheer panic that was present amongst the people on New Terminus as the Mule's grasp was growing stronger and stronger, ultimately causing the Foundation's own fleet to attack one another. It was beautiful but utterly petrifying at the same time. This is probably the season of Foundation that I'm the most emotionally invested in, because it does just feel like the stakes are the highest that they've ever been. That impending darkness and the third crisis evolving into the end as we know it is something that just feels so final, and the introduction of the Mule and his threat has elevated the season massively. Empire has always been a great villain to the Foundation, and even Tellum was in Season 2, but this really has taken it to the next level. I was a bit concerned when it seemed like there wasn't going to be much Harry Seldon in this season of the show, and to be honest, whilst I do miss the character, the new characters that we've got and the slight variance that we've had on the Cleons has been refreshing. So it's not made me feel like there's been a Seldon void that's needed filling. The Seldon inside of the vault didn't even know of the Mule, so his contribution was relatively limited anyway. During the scenes on New Terminus as well, I also thought seeing Mayor Indber acting the way that he did, interrupting the Harry Seldon to announce himself as the mayor only to get shut down by Seldon, was pretty hilarious. This season is definitely feeling like a slow burn, but I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. I'm imagining the next episode is probably going to be focused around the Battle of the Mule being on New Terminus and looking to destroy the First Foundation. It's probably going to be what triggers him to go to Trantor, and it's why the second Foundation was created, because the first was always likely going to fall. So I'm so excited to see where the next episode is going to go, if there are going to be any major deaths, and if the Mule is going to get his desire of burning everything to the ground in order to lure Gaal out and destroy everything in his path. So, there you have it, Foundation Season 3 Episode 6, Ending Explained.